The gift from the stranger. In the quiet village of Umuso, life moved at the rhythm of nature. Birds sang at dawn, children ran barefoot through dusty paths, and the elders told stories beneath the great Iroko tree when the sun dipped below the hills. Among these villagers lived a girl named Adana, no older than 16, who was known for her kindness, quiet strength, and radiant smile that could calm even the fiercest storms in her heart. Adana was an orphan. Her parents had died many harvests ago in a fire that destroyed their small hut. Since then, she lived alone in a little mud house on the village outskirts, near the whispering forest. She had no riches, no family, and no livestock, but what she had was compassion. She helped old women carry their firewood, nurse sick animals back to life, and gave her last yam to hungry children even when her own belly cried for food. It was during the harmattan season, when the air turned dry and leaves cracked underfoot, that the strange event began. That evening, Adana was returning from the stream with a clay pot of water balanced on her head when she noticed something unusual near the edge of the forest. A motionless figure lay among the dry leaves, a bent old man, clothed in a ragged brown wrapper, his body shivering despite the heat. Adana dropped her pot and rushed to him. "Baba, can you hear me?" she whispered, her hands touching his cold face. The old man opened his eyes weakly. "Water," he gasped. Without hesitation, she offered him the water from her broken pot. Then she dragged him slowly to her hut, laid him gently on her mat, and lit a fire to warm him. She cooked the last of her cassava and fed him spoon by spoon. He slept deeply through the night, and when he woke at dawn, his eyes shone with life again. "You saved me, child," he said, his voice now deep and steady. "You are the first soul in years to show me kindness without expecting anything in return." Adana shrugged, smiling gently. "It's what my mother would have done." The old man sat up and reached into the folds of his wrapper. He brought out a beautiful calabash, golden in color, with ancient carvings spiraling across its surface. The object pulsed faintly with an inner light, like the glow of fireflies trapped inside. "This is for you," he said, holding it out. Adana looked at it, stunned. "What is it?" "A powerful gift," he said. "But listen closely. Never make a wish out of greed or selfishness." The calabash listens, and it remembers. With that, the old man stood up. His posture was no longer frail. His eyes shimmered, not with age, but with something ageless and deep. Before she could ask another question, he walked into the forest and vanished without a trace, shadows of greed. The morning after the calabash disappeared from Adana's home, Umuso awoke to the smell of roasting goat meat and pounded yam. It was an odd scent, for the village had grown poorer in recent months. Food was scarce, and even the wealthiest families had begun rationing their meals. But this morning, the air was thick with celebration. Drums beat loudly. Laughter rang through the village square. Bright fabrics waved in the wind like banners of victory. Chief Okeke, proud and swollen with self-importance, stood at the center of it all. His compound overflowed with food, freshly roasted bushmeat, pots of spicy stew, bowls of golden jollof rice, and overflowing gourds of palm wine. Servants moved like ants, feeding every mouth that came forward. "Eat. Drink," Okeke bellowed, raising his calabash cup. "Let the gods see how we prosper. Let the spirits dance with us." No one questioned where the sudden wealth had come from. No one dared to ask how the chief, who just days ago complained of hunger, now offered enough food to feed 3 villages. All they saw was the feast. All they heard was music. All they cared about was the sweetness of meat in their mouths. But Adana knew. She stood far off at the edge of the celebration, her fist clenched, her eyes burning. The calabash was gone from her home, stolen in the night, and now it glowed faintly in the hands of Chief Okeke. The same gift that had granted her a single innocent wish was now being used by greedy men for power, wealth, and vanity. Beside the chief stood Obina, his son. tall, arrogant, and as power-hungry as his father. Obina wore a golden necklace and a fresh wrapper tied loosely around his waist. He sipped from the calabash like it was wine, laughing as a young maiden danced for him. But beneath the music and merriment, something was wrong. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the first man fell. A drummer, mid-beat, collapsed beside his talking drum, clutching his chest. Then a child vomited blood. Then another. Before long, 10 villagers lay groaning on the ground, their skin turning grey, their lips cracked and blue. Cries of panic rose like smoke. The feast came to a halt. And then, through the chaos, came the voice of Mama Igil, the village's oldest and most respected seer. "Stop," she cried, her voice as sharp as a blade and as loud as thunder. The villagers parted as she hobbled forward, her back bent with age, her white wrapper trailing behind her like a cloud. On her forehead was a mark of the ancestors, and around her neck hung dozens of tiny bones and charms. She pointed a wrinkled hand at the glowing calabash still clutched in Chief Okeke's hand. "You have brought doom upon us all." The crowd fell silent. Okeke frowned. "What are you talking about, old woman? Look around you. We are blessed." Mama Igil stepped closer, her eyes never blinking. "Foolish man. That calabash is not a blessing. It is a cursed vessel from the spirit world. It was never meant for mortal hands." Whispers filled the air like swarming bees. Okeke scoffed. "I see no curse. Only jealous people. Be gone, Igil. Your days of scaring children with tales are over." But Mama Igil stood her ground. She turned to the villagers and spoke with the voice of prophecy. "The calabash does not give without taking. Every wish, every treasure, every joy it offers comes with a shadow behind it. And tonight, that shadow is coming." That night, the wind changed. It blew harder than usual, cold, dry, and sharp, whistling through the trees like a warning. The animals in the village grew restless. Goats kicked at their ropes. Chickens refused to roost. Dogs barked into the empty air. Inside his chamber, Obine tossed and turned, sweat soaking his mat. He sat up suddenly, his heart pounding. His hands itched, and when he looked down, he gasped. His arms were no longer human. They had turned brown and bark-like, twisted like the branches of a cursed tree. His fingernails had thickened into sharp talons. His feet had cracked open, sprouting hoofs instead of toes. "No! No!" he screamed. The servants rushed in but froze at the sight of him. He knocked over a mirror. The face that stared back was not his own, it was stretched, disfigured, monstrous. In a frenzy, he grabbed the calabash and ran outside, hoping the night air would offer relief. Instead, he met Adana standing in the moonlight. "You stole it," she said, her voice steady. "You brought this on yourself." Obine fell to his knees. "Help me, please. I don't remember who I am anymore. I can't think." Adana looked at him with pity, then turned to see the chief, now stumbling from his home, sweat glistening on his brow, coughing and shaking. Behind him came shadows, not of people, but of spirits. Tall, formless beings with hollow eyes and no feet. They hovered in the air like smoke, whispering in a language no living man understood. Mama Igil appeared once more, her staff glowing faintly. "They've come," she whispered. "The spirits of the calabash. They have come to collect the debt." One by one, the spirits moved. They passed through walls, through roofs, into homes and huts, dragging out those who had touched the calabash. They did not speak. They did not scream. They simply wrapped themselves around their victims and vanished, swallowed by the wind. Obina was one of them. He let out a final, strangled cry before he was pulled into the night, his twisted body dissolving into dust. The feast was forgotten. The gold disappeared. The laughter turned to wails. What the calabash had given, it now took away. At dawn, only Adana and Mama Igeo remained in the square. The villagers gathered around, silent and trembling. The chief had been taken. So had his servants, his guards, and anyone who dared to make a wish. Adana walked forward and lifted the calabash. Its glow had faded. It now pulsed faintly, like a dying heartbeat. She turned to Mama Igeo. How do I stop this? The old woman looked into her eyes. There is only one place where such a cursed object can be destroyed. A place of ancient fire and eternal judgment. The fire pool of Nzemwata. The name stirred the wind. But the path is long. The forest is unforgiving. And the spirits, they will not let it go easily. Adana nodded. Then I will go. Before more are lost. Mama Igeo placed her hand on Adana's shoulder. You are brave, child. But you will need more than bravery. You will need wisdom, allies, and the strength to face your deepest fears. And so, as the village of Umuso mourned its losses, a new journey began. A girl with a glowing calabash. A curse too powerful for mortals. And a path that led into the very heart of the spirit world. The shadows of greed had passed, but a greater trial awaited. The fire pool of Nzemwata called. The journey to Nzemwata. The wind carried a whisper as dawn rose over Umuso. A low fog curled over the village paths, and the iroko trees swayed gently, as though warning the earth to be still. Adana stood at the edge of the forest, the calabash wrapped tightly in a woven cloth across her back. Its glow had dimmed, but its presence could still be felt, like an ember refusing to die out. Beside her stood Mama Igeo, firm despite her age, and 3 brave souls who had chosen to walk the dangerous road with them: Nedi, the best tracker in Umuso, lean and sharp-eyed; Chisum, the village's strongest warrior with a heart as steady as a drumbeat; and Ifyonanya, the gentle herbalist whose knowledge of plants was matched only by a quiet sorrow. She had once lost a daughter to a fever no remedy could heal. Together, they stepped into the whispering forest, where the path to the fire pool of Nzemwata began. The spirit wolves. The first days of travel were hard but bearable. Adana led with determination, the weight of the calabash making her steps heavy. Nedi moved like a shadow, reading footprints in the mud and the way leaves were crushed. Ifyonanya gathered herbs as they went, while Chisum always took the rear, watching for any danger. But on the 4th night, as the fire crackled beneath a moonless sky, they heard the howls. It was not the cry of a normal wolf. It echoed like wind through bones, hollow and haunting. They are here, Mama Igeo said grimly, pulling her charms closer. The spirits of lost hunters. Turned into wolves. They guard the sacred paths. The trees rustled as shadows emerged. Dozens of spirit wolves circled them, eyes glowing blue, teeth bared and long as knives. They moved silently, their paws never touching the ground. Chisum raised his spear, ready to fight, but Mama Igeo stopped him. Weapons will not save you from what is already dead. She began to chant. Her voice shook the leaves. Her bones cracked. And then, the charms around her neck flashed with light. The wolves growled, then backed away, vanishing into mist. No one spoke for a long time. The talking trees. The next morning, the forest grew denser. The air smelled sweet, like overripe fruit. The sun barely reached the ground. Vines hung like ropes, and the sound of footsteps disappeared under the forest weight. Then the trees began to speak. Not loudly. Not in full words. But in whispers. Teasing voices. Laughter that had no source. Adana. Ifyonanya. Nedi, come closer. We know what you want. They are trying to confuse us, Nedi said, squinting. Don't listen. But it was too late. Each of them was hearing something different. Chisum heard the voice of his long-dead brother, urging him to turn back before he suffered the same fate. Ifunanya heard the laughter of her daughter, soft, innocent, calling her deeper into the woods. Nedi thought he heard the chief of Umuso offering him land, riches, and power. Adana heard something else entirely, a life she never had. Her parents alive. A loving husband. A child of her own. A peaceful heart. Laughter and music under the stars. She stood still, tears forming. Her heart thudded. This could be real, she whispered. No, Mama Igil said beside her, gripping her wrist. It is only a mask. A trick from the Calabash. I want to believe it. Wanting something doesn't make it good, Adana. Look. Adana blinked. The image flickered. She saw the Calabash at her feet. Its glow brightened, feeding the illusion. The more she wanted, the stronger it became. She screamed and tore her gaze away. The image shattered like glass. The voices stopped. And the path ahead appeared again. Ifunanya's test. That evening, the group found a small clearing. They were tired, silent, and heavy with thought. While others rested, Ifunanya wandered alone, gathering herbs. She came upon a small pool. It glowed faintly. And there, in the water's reflection, was her daughter. Little Ngozi, with bright eyes and braided hair, smiling. Mama, the girl said. Come home. Ifunanya dropped her basket. Her knees shook. My child. Is it you? I've missed you, Mama. You can bring me back. Just wish it. Ifunanya looked down. The Calabash was sitting beside her. She hadn't even realized it had left Adana's back. She reached for it. Her fingers hovered. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But what would I be bringing back, she whispered. A memory. A spirit. A lie. The girl frowned. Her face flickered. Her eyes turned hollow. You don't love me anymore, it hissed. Ifunanya drew back. You are not Ngozi. You never were. The illusion vanished. She returned to camp with hollow eyes but a firm jaw. It tried, she told Mama Igil, but it failed. Nedi's disappearance. The next morning, Nedi was gone. His tracks led off the path and disappeared into thick fog. They searched, but there was no sign of him. Only his small knife, lying near the roots of an old tree. I warned you, Mama Igil said solemnly. The forest tempts each traveler differently. We must press on, or his sacrifice will be wasted. Adana wrapped the knife in cloth and placed it in her satchel. They continued with heavy hearts, now only 4. The wriggling ghost. By the 7th day, they neared the edge of the forbidden valley, where the fire pool lay. But before they could enter, they were stopped. 3 ghosts stood in their path, tall, robed in ash, their faces hidden beneath masks of wood. They spoke in unison. You seek to destroy what was never yours. To pass, each must answer a question of the soul. One stepped forward. To Chisholm, what is courage, if you know you will lose? Chisholm bowed his head. Courage is still standing. The ghost nodded. Another stepped forward. To Ifunanya, what is love, if it means letting go forever? Ifunanya whispered, love is not holding on to what hurts others. The ghost stepped back. Then the final ghost floated before Adana. To you, child of fate, what is power, if it cannot be controlled? Adana paused. She looked at the Calabash. Then she looked inward. Power is nothing, she said slowly, if it breaks what it touches. The ghost vanished, satisfied. The path opened. And there, across the rocks and flames, stood the edge of the fire pool of Nzemwata. The guardian spirit dragon. The air shimmered. The rocks burned beneath their feet. The pool glowed red, bubbling softly like a sleeping beast. But before they could approach, a roar shook the sky. From behind the flames, a creature rose. It had the body of a serpent, the wings of a bird, and the eyes of fire. It called around the pool, its voice like thunder. Who dares approach the sacred flame? Adana stepped forward, though her legs trembled. I am Adana. I seek to destroy this cursed Calabash. Too many have suffered. The dragon narrowed its eyes. Only a soul pure and willing to pay the price can release the fire. If I must pay, she said, I will. It roared again. The Calabash grants desire. Why cast it away? Because desire without wisdom is poison, she answered. And I would rather live with nothing than watch others die. The dragon studied her. Then, it called aside, revealing a stone bridge that led to the heart of the fire pool. Then pass, daughter of dust. But know this, once thrown, the Calabash cannot return. Nor can you ask for what has been lost. Adana took a deep breath. And began to walk. Trial by fire. The fire pool of Nzamwata boiled and hissed beneath a blood-orange sky. Crimson mist rolled across the ground, licking at the feet of those who dared to approach. At its center stood a narrow stone bridge, leading to the Temple of Flames, carved into the side of a blackened cliff. Smoke drifted from the cracks in the stone, and it rose in waves so thick they blurred the edges of reality. Adana stood before the entrance, clutching the Calabash tightly to her chest. The weight of it had never felt heavier, though it was no larger than a god. Her hands trembled, but her heart remained firm. Beside her, Mama Igio drew symbols in the sand with her staff. This is the place where destinies are remade. But the fire accepts only truth. Only you can enter, child. No one else. Adana looked to Chisum and Ifenanya, who nodded with solemn courage. Behind them, the guardian spirit dragon curled around the edge of the pool, watching silently. Its massive eyes flickered like lanterns in the night. I'm ready, Adana whispered. And with that, she stepped forward, alone, onto the bridge of fire. Inside the temple. As soon as she crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped. The heat of the fire gave way to a strange coldness. She found herself inside a chamber of swirling shadows. There were no walls, only shifting fog, and a floor of polished obsidian that reflected the sky above like water. The Calabash paused in her hands. Suddenly, a soft voice echoed around her. Adana. She turned. Before her stood her mother and father, the parents she had lost when she was just a child. They looked exactly as she remembered, her mother's kind eyes, her father's warm smile. Tears welled in her eyes. Mama. Papa. They held out their arms. You can stay with us now, her mother said. No more loneliness. No more pain. The Calabash glowed brighter, feeding on her emotion. Adana stepped forward. Her heart ached with longing. She missed them more than words could say. But something was wrong. Their shadows stretched unnaturally behind them. Their feet did not touch the ground. Their voices carried no breath. She stopped. You're not real. The illusion flickered. Her father's smile twisted. We can be, if you wish it. Just say the words. Use the Calabash. Adana gritted her teeth. I won't bring the dead back to life. Not like this. They screamed. The vision shattered. In their place stood a mirror. And in the mirror stood another Adana, but this one wore a golden crown, a glowing gown, and a smile of sharp teeth. I am who you could be, the reflection said. Adored. Feared. Powerful. I don't want power, Adana replied. The other Adana laughed. Liar. You wanted to be loved. To have a family. To be safe. And I can give you all of that. Just hand me the Calabash. Adana shook her head. You are the part of me that's afraid. That wants to hurt the world before it hurts me. You are not who I am. The reflection's eyes turned black. Then you are weak. It stepped out of the mirror. And lunged. Battle within. Adana dodged the shadow version's attack, rolling to the side. The calabash slipped from her arms, clattering to the ground. Her darker self snarled and charged again, this time tackling her to the floor. You're wasting your life, the shadow hissed. No one will remember your sacrifice. Adana struggled beneath her. I'd rather be forgotten than become like you. With a burst of strength, she shoved the shadow off and scrambled to her feet. The calabash was glowing red now, reacting violently to their conflict. The temple quaked. Cracks formed in the ground. The shadow charged again, but this time, Adana did not run. She stepped forward and embraced it. I see you, she whispered. You're the pain I never spoke. The fear I never faced. But I do not hate you. The shadow froze. Then screamed. It shattered like glass, vanishing into light. Adana dropped to her knees, sobbing. Meanwhile, outside the temple. The air outside had grown tense. Mama Igeal's bones stiffened. Her fingers curled around her staff. Something is coming, she said. Chisholm gripped his spear. They heard footsteps. From the forest emerged a group of armed men, wearing dark cloth and beads around their necks. Their faces were covered in white ash. Loyalists of Chief Okeke. Though the chief had been taken by the spirits, his secret followers had survived, and they had tracked the group to the fire pool. Give us the calabash, their leader barked, his eyes wild. We will finish what Chief Okeke started. You're too late, Ifunanya replied, stepping in front of the bridge. She has already entered. Then we will wait, the man sneered. And if she survives, the calabash will be ours. Mama Igeal whispered to Chisholm. By her time. Chisholm didn't need to be told twice. He roared and charged, his spear flashing in the light. Ifunanya tossed a vial of blinding powder into the air, creating a cloud of smoke. Chaos erupted at the edge of the pool as battle began. Adana walks into the fire. Inside the temple, the fog cleared. Adana stood before the final threshold, an arch of black stone that led to a pit of churning flame. The heart of Nzamwata. She picked up the calabash. It was no longer resisting her. It paused slowly, like a sleeping heartbeat. Let this end, she whispered. She stepped through the archway. The fire didn't burn her. It wrapped around her like warm water. She walked to the edge of the pool. Then tossed the calabash into the flame. The sky turns red. The reaction was instant. The fire exploded upward into the sky. The entire temple shook. Screams filled the air, not Adana's, but those of spirits trapped within the calabash. Dark shapes burst from the flames, writhing and twisting as they were consumed. Outside, the sky turned blood red. The earth trembled. The fighting stopped as both loyalists and villagers looked up in horror. The fire pool blazed like a second sun. Then, silence. The light returns. From the flames, a figure emerged. It was Adana. Her clothes were singed, her hair wild. But her body glowed with golden light. A halo of ancestral energy pulsed around her. Her eyes shimmered like starlight. The calabash was gone. The curse was broken. The dragon uncurled and bowed its head. You have done what no one else dared, it said. You faced yourself. You refused the easy path. You have set the balance right. Chisholm and Ifunanya ran to her side. She did it, Chisholm whispered. Mama Igeal smiled through tears. The fire accepted her. The loyalists dropped their weapons and fled. The earth stilled. The skies cleared. And peace returned to the land of Umuso. A new dawn in Umuso. The morning sun broke through the trees like golden fingers reaching into the heart of the forest. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the skies over Umuso were clear. No more red-tinted clouds. No more trembling ground. The cursed Calabash was gone. The fire pool of Nzemwater no longer burned with fury but glowed faintly, its flames come to a flicker of sacred warmth. Adana, still glowing faintly with ancestral lights, led her small group back toward the village. Every footstep felt lighter now, every breath easier. She walked in silence, but her heart was full. Chizem and Ifeananya walked beside her, bloodied but alive. Mama Igil, though aged beyond measure, stood straighter than ever, her staff clicking proudly with every step. As they neared Umuso's entrance, the familiar scent of yam porridge and smoke drifted in the air. Chickens clucked. Children laughed. And people ran out of their huts, crying, cheering, bowing. She's returned. Adana. She did it. The Calabash is no more. It was a scene from dreams. And for the first time in ages, there were no nightmares to follow. The return of the lost. In the days that followed, Umuso slowly healed. The fields began to bloom again. The animals returned from their hiding places. Children slept soundly, no longer waking up screaming in the night. And then, one morning, a boy stumbled out of the forest, clothes torn, eyes wild and confused. It was Obina. But something was different. He was thinner, softer in the face. His proud smirk was gone. He looked around as though he had never seen the village before. "Who are you?" he asked Adana, blinking. "Do I know you?" He had no memory of the Calabash. No memory of his greed, or the feast, or the spirits. The curse had taken everything from him, including his past. The villagers debated what to do, but it was Mama Igil who spoke with finality. The spirits took what was owed. Let the boy start again. Obina was taken in by an old couple with no children. He helped them in the fields. He smiled easily. And though he could not remember the man he once was, somehow, his heart had learned its lesson. As for Chief Okeke, his body was never found. Some say he was swallowed by the fire. Others claim they still hear his voice in the wind, begging for one last wish. But most agree he was lost to the curse forever. A hero's welcome. The village held a great gathering in the square beneath the Iroko tree, where drums pounded and flutes sang through the night. They dressed Adana in the finest wrappers, blue and gold, colors of the sky and wisdom. Beads were woven into her hair, and a crown of cowries placed upon her head. The elders stood before the crowd, and Mama Igil raised her staff high. Let all who have ears hear, Adana, daughter of no one, orphan of flame, has become the savior of us all. She faced temptation and turned it away. She faced death and walked through it. She faced power and chose humility. The crowd erupted in cheers. The king, dressed in his royal cloth, stepped forward. "We offer you land," he declared. "A place beside the palace. Servants. Wealth. Anything your heart desires." Adana looked at the sea of faces, smiling, weeping, hopeful. She stepped forward and bowed low. "I thank you. But I do not need riches. I do not need a throne." She paused, then added, "What I desire is peace. To serve. To teach." The elders nodded in approval. From that day, Adana became the spiritual guide of Umuso, a teacher of truth, a keeper of wisdom, and the guardian of stories. Her small home on the edge of the village became a place of healing, learning, and storytelling. Children came with questions. Elders came for advice. She taught them the path of the heart over the path of greed. Mama Igil's departure. One cool evening, as the sun painted the sky in amber and rose, Mama Igil visited Adana one final time. "My time here is ending," the old woman said, her voice soft. Adana took her hand. "You were my guide. My grandmother in spirit." "You were the fire, child," Mama Igil replied. I only showed you the match. As the stars blinked to life above them, Mama Ijo walked into the forest, and was never seen again. Some say she became part of the wind. Others say she joined the ancestors, her staff becoming a root beneath the Iroko tree. But her name was never forgotten. The last story. Years passed. Adana grew older, wiser. The village flourished. No child ever again spoke of the cursed Calabash, but its memory lived on, not as fear, but as a lesson. One night, as the cricket sang and the moon hung low, a mother sat beside her young daughter beneath the stars. "Tell me a story, Mama," the little girl said. The mother smiled and began. There was once a girl named Adana, who lived at the edge of a whispering forest. And so, the tale was passed on. A tale of selflessness. A tale of courage. A tale of a cursed calabash that brought misery to everyone who touched it, until one girl chose the path of light. Herb the end herb.